At 38 years old, Darnell Williams knew the precise weight of a promise. It was heavier than the spools of 12-gauge copper wire he hoisted over his shoulder every day, more unyielding than the steel-toed boots he laced up at 5:17 a.m. He was an electrician, a man who worked with his hands, earning a steady, if not spectacular, $61,000 a year. It was an honest living that paid for the $1,200 a month rent on their modest duplex in Charlotte's Beatties Ford neighborhood, kept food on the table, and ensured his 8-year-old daughter, Nyla, had everything she truly needed. But lately, the weight of his promises felt crushing, because he was beginning to suspect he was the only one carrying them. The silence from his wife Simone had grown into a presence of its own, a cold draft in their small home that no amount of insulation could fix. He felt a deep, gnawing dread that the life he had been building, wire by careful wire, was connected to a faulty circuit, ready to burn out at any moment. He just had no idea how right he was. We all know someone like Darnell, a good person working hard for their family, who deserves loyalty and love. But what happens when the person closest to them is living a lie? Stick with us on Love Beyond Pride to see how one man's quiet strength exposed a devastating betrayal and built a future he never imagined. The facade of their life was built on a foundation of seemingly shared sacrifices. Their duplex, nestled on a quiet street off Beatties Ford Road, was humble but clean. Darnell had spent a weekend repainting the living room a warm, buttery yellow, a $40 gallon of bare paint transforming the space. He'd fixed the leaky faucet under the kitchen sink himself, saving them a $200 plumber's fee. He was proud of these small acts of service. They were his love language, tangible proof of his commitment. He remembered a Saturday 2 years prior, standing in an Ashley home store, looking at a comfortable, gray sectional sofa. It was on sale for $899. Neela had jumped on the cushions, her beautiful dark coils bouncing, held back by 2 bright pink barrettes. "Can we get it, Daddy? It's so bouncy." Darnell had looked at Simone, a hopeful smile on his face. "What do you think, babe? We could finally get rid of that old floral thing." Simone, who was scrolling through her phone, glanced up, her expression unreadable. She was wearing a pair of jeans that cost $150 and a simple-looking white blouse he later found out was a $250 piece from Theory. "Darnell, really? An $899 sofa? We just don't have that kind of money floating around. You know how tight things are." She'd sighed, a theatrical sound of martyrdom. "We have to be saving for the future. For Neela." He had felt a familiar pang of guilt and inadequacy. She was right, of course. She handled the big-picture finances, managing their joint savings account, where a portion of his weekly paycheck was automatically deposited. He trusted her completely. You're right," he'd said, his shoulders slumping slightly. He scooped Nyla into his arms. "Sorry, sweetie. The old couch is still pretty good, right?" Neela, ever agreeable, had nodded, but he saw the flicker of disappointment in her eyes. They left the store empty-handed. Darnell didn't know then that just 3 days earlier, a transaction for $1,250 had been debited from that same joint savings account, not for a bill, but for a custom walk-in closet system from the Container Store. A closet he would never see. Their life was a tapestry of these small, dollar-tagged details. He wore the same $89 Timex watch he'd had for 5 years, its leather band worn smooth. Simone, however, had a collection of purses. There was the $450 Tory Burch tote she used for work, the $300 Kate Spade crossbody for weekends. When he'd once asked about it, she'd waved a dismissive hand. "It was a gift," she'd say, or "I got it at an outlet sale." He never questioned it. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe in the team he thought they were. He would get up in the dark, pack Nyla's lunch, a sandwich, a juice box, an apple, maybe a small bag of chips, all from their $180 weekly grocery run to Food Lion, and leave a cup of coffee on the counter for Simone. He'd work a 10-hour day, his body aching from climbing ladders and pulling cable, and come home to find Simone on her laptop at the small kitchen table. "Long day?" he'd ask. "You have no idea," she'd reply, her eyes never leaving the screen. She was a senior risk analyst at a major downtown bank, a job that came with a lot of stress, she said. He admired her intelligence, her ambition. She was the one with the corporate career, the one who navigated a world of glass towers and conference calls he couldn't imagine. He saw his role as providing the stable ground for her to launch from. Their two worlds were supposed to complement each other, his physical labor and her mental acuity, his $61,000 salary and her more substantial, though undisclosed income, all pouring into the same pot for the same family. It was a beautiful idea, and it was a complete and utter lie. The pot was a sieve, and everything he poured into it was draining away into a life he wasn't a part of. The outrage didn't accumulate all at once. It was a slow poison, administered in small, daily doses of cruelty and dismissal. The little cuts, the subtle humiliations began to stack up until Darnell felt like he was bleeding from 1,000 tiny wounds. Simone's condescension had become a constant, grating noise in the background of his life. One evening they had friends over, another couple from the neighborhood, for a simple backyard barbecue. Darnell was at the grill, a $150 charbroil he'd assembled himself, flipping burgers. He was talking about a complex wiring job he'd just completed at a new construction site, his deep brown skin luminous in the golden hour light, his face animated with the pride of a craftsman. "It was a 3-phase system, 480 volts, he explained, his hands gesturing to illustrate the layout. "The foreman was impressed we got it done a day ahead of schedule." From the patio table, Simone let out a short, sharp laugh. It wasn't a shared laugh. It was a correcting one. "Oh, Darnell," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "don't bore them with your work stories. It's just wires and switches." She turned to her friend, Lisa. "His job is so physical, I can't imagine. At the bank, we're dealing with billion-dollar portfolios. The stakes are just a little different." The air went still. Darnell's smile froze on his face. He felt the heat from the grill on his skin, but a cold shame washed over him. He looked down at his hands, calloused and clean, the hands that paid for the food on her plate, and felt them dismissed as crude and unimportant. He said nothing, just flipped a burger with a little too much force. The incident passed, but the sting of her words, just wires and switches, lingered for weeks. Then came the work trips. They started about 4 years ago, maybe once a quarter. A conference in Atlanta, a seminar in Raleigh. She would pack her $800 Rimowa carry-on suitcase, kiss him and Nyla goodbye, and be gone for 3 or 4 days. He never thought to question it. Her career was demanding. He would handle things at home, managing school drop-offs in his 10-year-old Toyota Camry, making sure Nyla's hair was neatly twisted and beaded each morning, a ritual he had learned from YouTube tutorials after his own mother, his mama, passed away. He was proud to be a capable father, but the trips became more frequent. Soon it was once a month. Then there were the late nights at the office and dinners with clients. He started noticing a change in her. She bought a new perfume, a scent he didn't recognize, something expensive and floral that clung to her clothes. It was Chanel No. 5, a $165 bottle of it. She started going to a different gym, a high-end fitness club in South Park called Equinox, with a membership fee of $220 a month. "They have better classes," she'd explained, "and it's good for networking." One Friday night, she was getting ready to go out with the girls from work. She was standing in front of the bedroom mirror in a stunning black dress, a $600 garment from a designer he'd never heard of. He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You look beautiful," he said softly, trying to feel a connection that was increasingly frayed. She stiffened. She didn't lean back into his embrace. She just patted his hand absently. "Thanks," she said, her eyes fixed on her own reflection. "Darnell, can you not? You'll wrinkle the fabric." She gently but firmly removed his hands. He stepped back, the rejection a physical blow. As she was grabbing her purse, her phone, a brand new $1,100 iPhone, lit up on the dresser. A text message appeared on the screen for a fleeting second before she snatched it up. He only saw a name, Alex, and a string of heart emojis. "Who's Alex?" he asked, his voice quiet. Simone didn't miss a beat. Her face was a perfect mask of nonchalance. "Alexandra? She's a new VP in my division. We're all going out." She shoved the phone into her $450 purse. "Don't wait up." The door clicked shut behind her, leaving Darnell in a silence that was louder than any argument. He knew, in the pit of his stomach, that Alex was not an Alexandra. But to confront her without proof felt like stepping off a cliff. What could he say? That he saw a name and some emojis? She would laugh at him, call him paranoid, insecure. She would twist it until he was the one apologizing. He had seen her do it before. The final, most brutal cut came on their anniversary. He had saved for 2 months, pulling extra weekend shifts to buy her a delicate gold necklace with Nyla's birthstone. It cost him $550, a significant sum that he was proud to spend on her. He made reservations at a nice, but not extravagant Italian restaurant downtown. He even bought a new shirt for himself, a crisp button-down from Belk for $65. He gave her the gift over dinner. She opened the small box, looked at the necklace, and gave him a thin, polite smile. "Oh," she said. "That's sweet, Darnell." She didn't put it on. She just placed the box beside her plate. "Do you like it?" he asked, his hope dwindling. "It's nice," she said, taking a sip of her $14 glass of wine. Then she delivered the blow, wrapped in a casual observation. "You know, my boss, Mr. Henderson, just bought his wife a diamond tennis bracelet for their anniversary from Tiffany's. I can't even imagine what that must have cost. Probably more than your car." She laughed, a light, airy sound that didn't reach her eyes. He looked at his $89 Timex. He looked at the $550 necklace sitting ignored on the table. He looked at her face, the face of the woman he had loved for 12 years, and for the first time, he didn't see his wife. He saw a stranger, a cruel stranger who measured his love in dollars and found it wanting. He felt a profound sense of outrage, a cold, hard anger that settled deep in his chest. It was the moment he stopped making excuses for her. It was the moment the love began to die, replaced by a grim, gathering resolve. He just didn't know what to do with it. Not yet. The discovery came on a gray, drizzly Saturday in late October, the kind of day that forces you indoors. Rain slicked the windows of the duplex, and the sky was the color of wet concrete. With a football game droning on the TV in the background, Darnell decided to tackle the hall closet, a cramped space that had become a graveyard for old coats, mismatched shoes, and forgotten junk. Nyla was at a friend's house for a birthday party, and Simone was, predictably, at a team-building retreat for the weekend. The quiet in the house felt both peaceful and unnerving. He pulled out old jackets, a bag of Nyla's outgrown shoes he'd been meaning to donate, and a stack of board games with missing pieces. In the very back, pushed onto a high shelf, was a beige trench coat. It was a classic, expensive-looking Burberry coat he remembered her buying 5 or 6 years ago. She'd claimed she got it for a steal at a consignment shop for $300, but he now suspected it was closer to its $1,800 retail price. She hadn't worn it in at least 2 years. As he lifted the coat off the shelf, something slipped from the inside pocket. It wasn't a soft flutter like a tissue, but a crisp, sharp sound as a folded piece of paper hit the hardwood floor. He bent down and picked it up. It was a receipt. Not a flimsy thermal paper receipt from a grocery store, but a thick cardstock invoice, professionally printed. His eyes scanned the details, and the world tilted on its axis. The company name at the top was the Regent at South Park. The date was from 8 months ago, February 12th. The line item description made the air leave his lungs. Condominium Unit 14G, security deposit. And next to it, the amount, $4,800, paid in full. The customer name was Simone Williams. His heart started hammering against his ribs, a frantic trapped bird. South Park. The neighborhood she was always finding excuses to go to. The neighborhood with the Equinox gym and the upscale boutiques. He stood there for a full minute, the receipt trembling in his hand. It made no sense. A security deposit? For what? Why would she pay a $4,800 deposit on a condo without even mentioning it? With shaking fingers, he pulled out his phone, a functional but aging Samsung Galaxy that cost him $200 2 years ago. He typed "The Regent at South Park" into the Google search bar. The results loaded instantly. The first link was to a glossy real estate website. He clicked it. He was met with images of a gleaming glass tower, a resort-style swimming pool, and a lobby that looked like a 5-star hotel. The marketing copy swam before his eyes. Charlotte's premier luxury living. Residences starting from the high 300s. He felt a wave of nausea. He scrolled through the gallery, his thumb moving numbly across the screen. He saw photos of sleek, modern kitchens with quartz countertops and stainless steel appliances. He saw minimalist living rooms with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city. He saw bedrooms with private balconies. It was a world away from their little duplex with its buttery yellow walls and mismatched furniture. He found the floor plans. Unit 14G, a 1-bedroom plus den, 980 square feet. Price, $389,000. Darnell sank down onto the floor of the hallway, the dusty coats piled around him. He leaned his head back against the wall, the cool drywall a stark contrast to the fire raging in his mind. $389,000. The number was astronomical, impossible. Where would that kind of money come from? They were a family that debated an $899 sofa. They were a family where he worked overtime to afford a $550 necklace. And then, a more sinister question bloomed in the darkness of his thoughts. This wasn't a plan for them. This was a plan for her. The deposit was in her name only. The condo was a 1-bedroom. This was an escape hatch, a fully furnished, beautifully appointed $389,000 escape hatch. He thought about the late nights, the work trips, the secret smiles at her phone, the man named Alex, the constant belittling of his life, his work, his worth. It wasn't just condescension, it was justification. She had been building a case against him in her own mind for years, painting him as small and unambitious to make her grand betrayal feel like a necessary, even deserved, evolution. 7 years. The invoice was dated 8 months ago, but the lie felt older, deeper. How long had she been planning this? How much money had she funneled away while telling him they were broke? The shared savings account she managed so diligently. It wasn't a family fund. It was her personal slush fund. Every dollar of his he'd trustingly deposited, Every sacrifice he'd made had gone to building her secret, separate life. The life where she wasn't the wife of just an electrician. The rain beat a steady rhythm against the windows. Darnell sat in the dim hallway, the receipt for a life he never knew he was funding lying flat in his palm. The shock was curdling into something else, something cold, hard, and terrifyingly clear. The outrage he'd felt over the necklace, the public humiliations, was nothing compared to this. This was a grand architectural betrayal, meticulously planned and executed over years. He didn't scream. He didn't punch a wall. He carefully folded the $4,800 receipt, stood up on steady legs, walked back to the closet, and placed it back inside the pocket of the Burberry trench coat. He pushed the coat back onto the high shelf, exactly where he had found it. He would not confront her. He would not give her the satisfaction of a screaming match or the opportunity to lie, to manipulate, to turn this back on him. No, he was an electrician. He understood circuits. He knew that to fix a problem this profound, you don't just flip a switch. You go to the breaker box, you study the schematics, and you cut the power at the source. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in strategic restraint. Darnell moved through his life with a chilling, unnatural calm, a man playing a part in a play where only he knew the final act. On the outside, he was the same Darnell. He got up at 5:17 a.m., he packed Nyla's lunch, he went to work. But on the inside, a silent, methodical investigation was underway. He was a ghost in his own home, watching, listening, gathering. The Sunday Simone returned from her team-building retreat. He greeted her with a placid smile. "Hey, babe, how was it?" he asked, taking her $800 suitcase from her hand. "Exhausting," she said, kicking off her $120 Rothy's flats. "Same old corporate nonsense. Trust falls and mission statements." She looked at him, a flicker of something, maybe suspicion at his good mood, in her eyes. "You seem cheerful." "Just a good, quiet weekend," he said, his voice even. "Got the closet cleaned out." He watched her face for any reaction. There was none. The Burberry coat and its damning secret were the furthest thing from her mind. That night at dinner, he served the spaghetti and meatballs he had made, Nyla chattering away about her birthday party. He looked at Simone over the rim of his water glass, studying the curve of her jaw, the way her eyes darted to her phone every few minutes. Every word out of her mouth now sounded like a lie. Every casual statement felt like a carefully constructed piece of her false narrative. He was living with a stranger, a brilliant actress, and his only goal was to keep her from realizing her audience was no longer fooled. A week later, he initiated the next phase. It was a Tuesday evening, while he was drying the dishes, and she was on her laptop. "Hey," he began, his tone deliberately casual. "I was looking at my pay stub today, thinking about taxes coming up. Maybe we should sit down this weekend and go over the savings statements together, just to get a clear picture for our accountant." Simone's fingers froze on her keyboard. She didn't look up, but he saw her shoulders tense. "There's no need for that, Darnell," she said, her voice a little too sharp. "I have it all under control. I use a software program. It's complicated. You wouldn't understand it? You wouldn't understand it." The familiar condescension. It used to sting. Now it was just evidence. "I'm sure I could follow along," he pressed gently, testing the boundary. "I wire 3-phase systems. I can handle a bank statement." She finally looked at him, her eyes cold. "I said I have it handled. Don't you trust me?" It was the perfect trap, the question designed to make him the villain. The old Darnell would have backed down, apologized for questioning her. The new Darnell met her gaze and smiled a quiet, empty smile. "Of course I do," he said. "Just a thought." He turned back to the dishes, his heart beating a steady, cold rhythm. He had his answer. The panic in her eyes was all the confirmation he needed. The following Saturday, he told her he was taking Nyla to see her Auntie Clara, his sister, who lived an hour away in Gastonia. It wasn't a lie, but he dropped Nyla off for a day of baking cookies and playing with her cousins. And then he drove back to Charlotte. He parked his 2012 Camry down the street from their duplex and waited. At 11:15 a.m., Simone's white BMW 3 Series, a $43,000 car he now realized was likely paid for with their joint money, pulled out of the driveway. She wasn't dressed for running errands. She was wearing a stylish athleisure outfit, her hair pulled back perfectly. He followed her, staying a safe 4 cars behind. She didn't drive towards her office downtown. She didn't drive towards a mall. She took the route he knew by heart from his Google search, towards South Park. He didn't follow her all the way to the Regent. He didn't need to see her walk through the shimmering glass doors. He just needed to see her turn onto the final access road. He watched her car signal, then disappear from view. He pulled his own car over into a CVS parking lot and sat there for a long time, the engine off. He didn't feel anger or sadness anymore. He felt a profound, hollow emptiness. This was real. It was all real. The most devastating moment of his silent investigation, however, came not from his own detective work, but from the innocent hand of his daughter. A few nights later, Nyla came padding into the living room in her pajamas, her face serious. Her natural hair was in 4 puffy sections, soft and full. She was holding a piece of construction paper. "Daddy, I made a picture for you," she said, her voice a proud whisper. He smiled, a genuine smile for the first time in weeks. "Let me see it, sweet pea." She unfolded the paper. On it, drawn in crayon, were 2 houses. One was small and brown with a red door, a clear depiction of their duplex. A stick figure with wild, curly hair, Nyla, stood outside with a figure labeled Daddy. The other house was a tall, gray rectangle with lots of little blue squares for windows. A single figure labeled Mommy stood beside it. Darnell's breath caught in his throat. "Mommy says we might get to live in a new house soon. A really big one with a swimming pool," Nyla said, her little finger pointing at the tall gray building. Her brow furrowed in confusion, the pure, unfiltered honesty of a child. She looked up at him, her dark eyes wide. "Daddy," she asked, in a long, breathless rush, "which one is our house going to be?" He stared at the drawing, the 2 houses, the divided family. Simone had been preparing their daughter for the split, planting the seeds of a new, better life with Mommy in the shiny tower. The cruelty of it, the calculated campaign to win their child's allegiance, was breathtaking. He felt a surge of protective fury so intense it almost made him dizzy. He pulled Nyla onto his lap, hugging her tight, burying his face in her sweet-smelling hair. He took a deep, steadying breath. "This one, baby girl," he said, his voice thick but firm. He tapped the drawing of their little brown duplex. "This is our home. It always will be." He held her for a long time, rocking her gently. Later that night, after she was asleep, he took the drawing. He smoothed out the creases and placed it carefully on top of a growing pile of notes in a folder hidden at the bottom of his toolbox. It would be the first page in the binder. Exhibit A. A child's drawing that told the entire, heartbreaking story. The first step from victim to strategist cost him $2,500. It was money he didn't really have, pulled from a small personal savings account he'd built from a few weekend side jobs, cash he'd kept separate from their joint finances. It was his just-in-case fund. And this he knew was the ultimate just-in-case. He found her online. Alicia Hayes, Esquire. A highly rated divorce and family law attorney with an office in a modest but professional building in University City. She was a black woman, and her photo exuded a no-nonsense competence that Darnell was drawn to. He sat across from her in a conference room that smelled of coffee and paper. The chair, a simple but sturdy $300 office chair, felt solid beneath him. Ms. Hayes listened without interruption as he laid out the story, his voice low and even. He told her about the changes in Simone, the financial secrecy, the condescension. Then he slid the folder across the polished table. He didn't show her the original receipt. He had made a high-quality color copy, and on top of it, he placed Nyla's drawing. Ms. Hayes studied the drawing for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she looked at the copy of the $4,800 deposit receipt. She picked it up, examining it closely. "The Regent at South Park," she murmured. She looked back at Darnell, her eyes sharp and intelligent. "Mr. Williams," she said, her voice crisp, "you have been playing the part of a fool very, very well. And that is exactly what we needed." She leaned forward. "Your wife's behavior, if what you suspect is true, constitutes marital waste and dissipation of assets. In North Carolina, that's a very big deal. But suspicion isn't enough. We need proof. Undeniable, documented proof of where every single dollar went." She steepled her fingers. "I work with an excellent forensic accountant. His name is Ben Chen. He's the best. But he is not cheap. His retainer is $5,000. Darnell's stomach clenched. $5,000. That was almost a month of his take-home pay. He saw the hesitation on his face. "Mr. Williams," Ms. Hayes said, her voice softening slightly, but losing none of its steel. "Justice has a price tag. You can confront her now, have a terrible fight, and maybe she admits to some of it, lies about the rest, and hides the assets before we can ever trace them. Or you can find the money. Let us build an ironclad case in silence, and you can enter the negotiation not as a victim, but as the man holding all the cards. The choice is yours." He knew she was right. "I'll get the money," he said, his voice firm. Getting that $5,000 was one of the hardest things he'd ever had to do. The remaining $2,500 from his side job fund wasn't enough. There was only one other source. His father, before he passed, had left him his old truck, a 1998 Ford Ranger. It wasn't worth much, maybe $5,000 on a good day, but it was packed with sentimental value. It was the truck his dad had taught him to drive in. It was the truck he'd used for his first side jobs as a teenager. Selling it felt like selling a piece of his own history, but Ms. Hayes's words echoed in his mind. Justice has a price tag. He put an ad on Craigslist. A young landscaper bought it 3 days later for $4,500 cash. Darnell watched him drive it away, a lump forming in his throat. He took the cash, added it to the money from his fund, and got a cashier's check for Ben Chen. The meeting with the forensic accountant took place a week later in a sterile office park near the airport. Ben Chen was a quiet, meticulous man in his 50s. He didn't offer sympathy. He offered a process. "With a subpoena, we can access the records for the joint account you shared," Chen explained, pointing to a flowchart on his computer screen. "We will trace every transfer out. We'll look for patterns. Regular transfers of the same amount. Transfers to unknown accounts. We follow the money. It always leaves a trail." For the next 6 weeks, Darnell continued his performance at home while Chen's work unfolded in the background. Every few days, an email would arrive from Chen with a brief, encrypted update. Update 1. Located secondary checking account. Opened 7 years ago at a different bank. Sole signatory, Simone Williams. Initial funding, $500 transfer from joint account. Update 2. Identified pattern of biweekly transfers from joint account to secondary account, beginning 7 years ago. Initial amount, $250. Increased to $500 3 years ago. Total identified to date, $96,000. Update 3 traced funds from secondary account to a high-yield savings account and a brokerage account, also in her name only. Total assets in these accounts: $132,000. Update 4 located wire transfer for $77,800 from the brokerage account for the down payment on the South Park condo. Title is in her name alone. We also found a credit card, Amex Platinum, linked to the secondary account. Statement shows charges for the Equinox membership, meals at expensive restaurants, and airline tickets for trips that don't match her stated work travel. Darnell would read these updates on his phone during his lunch break, sitting in his work van. The numbers were staggering. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a corporation of deceit. She had built an entire financial infrastructure to support her other life. The grand total Chen had uncovered was $214,000. $214,000? Siphoned away while she told him they couldn't afford an $899 sofa. Ms. Hayes instructed him to wait. "She thinks she's in control," she said over the phone. "Let her think that. In fact, let her make the first move." As if on cue, a week later, Darnell was served with divorce papers. He came home from work to find them taped to his front door. He sat at the kitchen table and read the petition. Simone was filing, citing irreconcilable differences. She was demanding the sale of the duplex, 50-50 custody of Nyla, and alimony, claiming her standard of living would be impacted. It was the final, audacious piece of her plan. She was going to leave him, take half of what little he thought they had, and demand he pay for her lifestyle, all while she had a secret, six-figure nest egg and a luxury condo waiting for her. The sheer arrogance of it was stunning. He called Miss Hayes. "She filed," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Good," the lawyer replied, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. "She just handed us the gun and loaded it for us. Now we have a case number and a judge assigned. She's chosen the battlefield. Mr. Chen is finalizing his report. We're ready. It's time to prepare the binders." The strike was planned with the precision of a military operation. Ms. Hayes called it the Day of Reckoning. The date was set for a Tuesday morning, November 19th. The time? 10 a.m. sharp. Darnell had taken the day off work, telling Simone he had a mandatory safety training seminar across town. The lie came easily now. He dropped Nyla off at school, her laughter echoing in the car, the sound a painful reminder of what he was fighting for. Then he drove home and waited. The evidence had been compiled into 2 identical 3-inch thick binders. Each one was a monument to Simone's deceit. The first section contained Ben Chen's full forensic accounting report, 80 pages of spreadsheets, flowcharts, and bank statements that traced the $214,000 from their joint account to her secret empire. The second section contained supporting documents, a copy of the deed to the $389,000 South Park condo, her solo mortgage application where she'd fraudulently claimed to be single, and the last 12 months of her secret American Express Platinum card statements detailing a life of lavish spending. The final section contained just 1 page, protected in a plastic sleeve, Nyla's crayon drawing of the 2 houses. Underneath it, Ms. Hayes had added a simple, devastating caption, Exhibit A, a child's understanding of a divided home. At 9:45 a.m., Darnell sat at his kitchen table, his phone in front of him. He felt strangely calm, the way he felt before tackling a particularly dangerous high-voltage job. All the preparation was done. All that was left was the execution. At precisely 10 a.m., 2 things happened simultaneously across the city of Charlotte. The first occurred in a sleek, glass-walled law office in the heart of Uptown. A professional process server, a tall man in a nondescript suit, walked into the reception area of the prestigious firm representing Simone. He approached the receptionist, a young woman sitting behind a $10,000 marble desk. "Delivery for attorney David Roth regarding the Williams case," the server said, placing one of the heavy binders on the counter with a solid thud. It's for his immediate attention. The second event took place 6 blocks away, at the corporate headquarters of the bank where Simone worked as a senior risk analyst. A second process server, a middle-aged woman with a determined look, entered the towering lobby. She bypassed the main reception and took the elevator to the 45th floor, to the executive wing. She walked into the office of the bank's chief ethics and compliance officer. She handed the second binder to a startled executive assistant. "This is evidence for the board's review regarding a senior employee, Simone Williams," she stated clearly. "It details significant financial misconduct and potential reputational risk to the bank." Darnell pictured the scenes in his mind, the quiet implosion, the ripple effect. He didn't have to wait long. At 10:07 a.m., his phone buzzed. It was a text from Simone. "My lawyer just called. He received some package from you. What is this? What did you do?" Darnell read the message and set the phone down. He did not reply. At 10:22 a.m., it buzzed again. Another text. "Darnell, call me. Now." "What is in this binder? My lawyer is freaking out. He's talking about fraud. This is insane. You're trying to ruin me." Silence. He took a sip of his cold coffee. At 11:03 a.m., the phone rang. It was her. He let it go to voicemail. A message alert popped up a minute later. He listened to it on speaker, his face a stony mask. Her voice was sharp, laced with fury and disbelief. "How dare you, Darnell? Going to my job? My job? Do you have any idea what you've just done? You are a pathetic, vindictive fool. You think you can scare me with some homemade binder of lies? You just made the biggest mistake of your life." He saved the message. The house was silent for over an hour. Darnell just sat, waiting. He knew the gears of corporate justice and legal panic were grinding, slowly at first, then with increasing speed. At 12:34 p.m., another voicemail. He played it. Her voice had changed. The anger was gone, replaced by a high, thin wire of panic. "Darnell, please call me. My boss just called me into a meeting with HR and someone from legal. They have the binder. They're talking about suspension, an internal investigation. Please, we can fix this. I can explain everything. I'll give the money back. Just call them off, please." He saved the message. He felt nothing. This wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the truth. At 2:15 p.m., the final call came. He let it go to voicemail again. He waited a few minutes before playing it. This time, her voice was broken. She was sobbing, the sounds thick and ragged. "They walked me out," she choked out between gasps. They took my badge and my laptop. My security pass is deactivated. An escort walked me to the door in front of everyone. My career? Darnell, it's over. Everything, it's all gone. I'm sorry, okay? I'm so sorry. What about Nyla? What have you done to us? What have you done to us?" The question hung in the air. He listened to her cry for another 30 seconds before the message ended. He calmly deleted all 3 voicemails and the text messages. They had served their purpose. They were the frantic, dying signals from a world he had just unplugged. He stood up from the kitchen table, stretched, and went into the garage to sort some electrical components. The job was done. The power was cut. The consequences cascaded with brutal, systematic efficiency. Simone's life, so carefully constructed on a foundation of lies and stolen money, did not just crack. It disintegrated. Each downfall was a direct and measurable result of the evidence presented in the binders. First, her career evaporated. The bank, a massive institution pathologically averse to reputational risk, acted swiftly. An internal investigation that was supposed to take weeks was concluded in 3 days. The evidence was too overwhelming to dispute. Ben Chen's forensic report was a clean, undeniable kill shot. Simone was fired for cause, citing gross ethical misconduct and fraudulent activity. With the termination, she lost her $135,000 annual salary. More devastatingly, she forfeited a portfolio of unvested stock options and performance bonuses that were valued at just over $80,000. Her entire professional identity, the very thing she had used as a weapon to belittle Darnell, was wiped out overnight. She was blacklisted in the Charlotte financial community, her name toxic. Second, her legal strategy collapsed. Her high-priced divorce attorney, David Roth, dropped her as a client within 24 hours of receiving the binder. He filed a motion to withdraw, citing to the court that his client had materially misrepresented her financial position and failed to be truthful during their consultations. It was a humiliating and public rebuke. Forced to find new counsel with no income and a tarnished reputation, Simone ended up with a less experienced, court-appointed lawyer who was completely outmatched by Alicia Hayes. The divorce proceedings were not a negotiation. They were a surrender. In a hearing that lasted less than an hour, the judge, a stern woman who had clearly read the entire binder, delivered a verdict that was swift and total. Citing the staggering and calculated nature of the financial deception, the judge awarded Darnell 100% ownership of the marital home, the Beatties Ford duplex. He was granted full primary and legal custody of Nyla, with Simone receiving supervised visitation twice a month. The judge then entered a financial judgment against Simone for the full $214,000 she had dissipated from the marital estate, plus Darnell's legal and accounting fees, which totaled a staggering $22,500. The gavel came down with a sharp crack. Third, her secret empire was liquidated to pay her debts. The beautiful $389,000 condo in South Park, the symbol of her new life, became her prison. With the court's judgment hanging over her, she was forced to put it on the market immediately. In her haste to sell, she accepted an offer well below its peak value. After the realtor's commission, closing costs, and a penalty for breaking her mortgage early, the sale netted her approximately $350,000. From that, she had to write a cashier's check to Darnell's lawyer for $236,500. The transfer was made electronically. Darnell watched the funds appear in his account, not with glee, but with a quiet, somber sense of finality. After paying her debt to Darnell, Simone was left with a little over $113,000. It was a substantial amount of money to most people, but for her, it was the wreckage of a 7-year scheme that had cost her everything. Her social life vanished. The friends from her Equinox gym and the South Park wine bars, the ones who knew her as a successful, sophisticated single woman, disappeared the moment her story became a whisper in those circles. Her family, ashamed and bewildered by the scale of her deceit, offered little support. She ended up renting a small, one-bedroom apartment for $950 a month in a sprawling, anonymous complex off Independence Boulevard, miles away from the glamour of South Park. Her white BMW was repossessed because she could no longer afford the $650 monthly payment. She was forced to buy a 15-year-old Honda Civic with 150,000 miles for $3,500 in cash. The woman who mocked Darnell's Timex and dreamed of Tiffany's bracelets was now rebuilding her life from scratch, completely and utterly alone, a consequence not of his revenge, but of her own choices finally coming due. 2 years passed. The silence left by Simone's departure was gradually replaced by new sounds. Nyla's laughter echoing off the buttery yellow walls, the buzz of a saw from Darnell's new workshop in the garage, and the easy rhythm of a life rebuilt on a foundation of truth. The duplex in Beatty's Ford was no longer a place of tension and secrets. It was a sanctuary. Nyla, now 10, was thriving. Her deep brown skin was radiant, and her coils, which Darnell had become an expert at styling, were often adorned with the colorful beads she loved, clicking softly when she ran to hug him. Her drawings, taped all over the $1,400 stainless steel refrigerator Darnell had finally bought, were all of one house, their house. Happy figures with big smiles stood in the yard. Darnell had taken the $236,500 he'd recovered and made a decision. He could have invested it, bought a bigger house, or taken a long vacation. Instead, he did something else. He paid off the last of his own modest debts, put a significant portion into a college fund for Nyla, and used the remaining $150,000 to pour back into the community that had always been his home. He founded a non-profit organization called the Beatty's Ford Electrical Apprenticeship. He converted his two-car garage into a fully equipped training center, spending $20,000 on tools, wiring boards, and safety equipment. He partnered with local community leaders and a nearby church to find young, directionless men and women from the neighborhood, kids who were at risk of falling through the cracks. He didn't just teach them to be electricians, he taught them about integrity, reliability, and the quiet dignity of a skilled trade. He paid them a small stipend while they learned, using his own master electrician license to get them work on real job sites. His first apprentice, a young man named Jamal, who had been stocking shelves at a grocery store, was now a second-year apprentice making $22 an hour, with a bright future ahead of him. Darnell had turned the pain of his betrayal into a ladder for others. He was building something real, something that would last. One sunny afternoon, he received a text from an unknown number. "Darnell, it's Simone. Can we please talk? Just for a few minutes. I'll meet you anywhere." He hesitated for a long time before replying. "Okay, Freedom Park. Tomorrow at 3. She was already there when he arrived, sitting on a bench near the lake. The 2 years had changed her. The expensive clothes were gone, replaced by simple jeans and a sweater. She looked tired, humbled, but there was a clarity in her eyes he hadn't seen before. She had a new job as a bookkeeper for a small plumbing supply company, making $42,000 a year. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, her voice quiet. "Nyla has a right to a mother who is at peace," he replied simply. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "I was a monster," she whispered. "I was so lost in what I thought I wanted, what I thought I deserved, that I destroyed the only good thing in my life. I disrespected you. I disrespected our family, and I almost ruined our daughter's faith in what a home is. There is no excuse. There is only the truth. And the truth is, I am sorry. I am so deeply, profoundly sorry for the pain I caused you." Darnell listened. He didn't see the woman who had humiliated him at barbecues or sneered at his anniversary gift. He saw a person stripped of all pretense, facing the wreckage of her own creation. He felt no anger. He felt no love. He felt a quiet, solemn pity. He had done his grieving long ago, in the silent weeks of his investigation. "I forgive you, Simone," he said, and the words felt true and clean in his mouth. "I forgive you for me, and I forgive you for Nyla. We've moved on. Our life is good, it's full." He stood up. "I hope you find your own peace." He turned and walked away without looking back, the sun warm on his face. That evening, Darnell stood in his backyard, watching Nyla chase fireflies in the twilight. His apprentice, Jamal, had just left after they'd spent the afternoon building a new wooden deck together, a project that cost about $2,000 in materials. The smell of freshly cut lumber hung in the air. He thought about Simone's $389,000 condo with its panoramic views and sterile silence. He looked at his own small, paid-for home, at the love of his child, at the community he was helping to build, one young person at a time. He realizes now that true wealth is not measured in dollars or square footage. It isn't found in glass towers or designer labels. True wealth is the solid feel of the ground beneath your feet, the trust of a child's hand in yours, and the deep, unshakable pride that comes from building a life of purpose and integrity. It's the quiet satisfaction of knowing you are exactly where you are supposed to be, surrounded by a love that you have earned and nurtured, a love beyond pride. What Darnell built from the ashes of his marriage is a testament to his character. Have you ever seen someone turn a painful ending into a powerful new beginning? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to Love Beyond Pride for more stories of resilience and hope.